One of the most common complaints that mechanics get about people's cars is it's losing power while accelerating. You're driving along, everything's fine until you put your foot down, and instead of responding to the accelerator by providing more power, you hit a flat spot where the engine dies, or power is dropped, or there is no increase in power whatsoever. And diagnosing this just requires that we have an understanding of all the factors that are involved that could potentially contribute to an engine losing power while we're accelerating. The quicker we diagnose this fault, the cheaper it will be. In the main, if we ignore faults or allow them to run on, they become more expensive. There's more components that are involved, or the damage becomes much greater. It really is worth listening to our car and what it's trying to tell us when we hit that flat spot when we're trying to accelerate. We're going to break down the 4-stroke cycle and look at how different components within the engine contribute to each of these. You've got the suck, the squish, the bang and the blow. Now, I realise they're not technically accurate, and I'm sure a few of you are going to pick me up on that in the comments, but that is what the industry generally accepts. Suck, squish, bang, blow as the 4 phases of a combustion engine. You've got the air and fuel going into the engine. It's compressed, it ignites or is ignited. As it expands, as it starts to burn, power is created. Then you've got the exhaust gases and they need to leave the engine. If you interrupt any one of those phases under load, you're going to experience a loss of power. But before we get into the detail and break down each of these 4 phases of the combustion process, there's some basic checks or basic triage that we need to carry out, and in many cases these will fix the problem or diagnose the fault. First thing is pull the fault codes. Plug an OBD2 port reader into the OBD2 port and download the error codes. That is a rich mine of information about problems that the car is experiencing and can give you a really good clue as to where you should be looking to fix these faults. Check the fuel level. If this happens when the fuel level is low, it could potentially be a problem with the fuel pump or a component within the fuel system, and when the tank is full, that problem goes away. And if that's the issue, you know then to look at some issue within the fuel tank, the sender unit, the fuel pump, the injectors, and diagnosing the fault through the fuel system. But just having a full tank, and if the problem goes away, you know straight away you're looking at some kind of fuel issue. Check the engine oil level. If the engine oil level is too low, that can trigger a limp home mode on many modern engines, causing this situation where we lose power. And it may only happen when we accelerate. The oil that's in the pan, in the sump, falls to the back of the engine, creating this low pressure condition, causing the engine to realise there's insufficient oil pressure and to back off the power. Just pull the dipstick, check the oil is where it should be between the min and the max levels, and the oil is not degraded, it's not absolutely black and coked up with all sorts of gunk. Keep an eye on the engine's temperature gauge. If the engine is running hot, that can cause all sorts of running problems, and if this loss of power occurs when the engine is warm, that could well be related to the cooling system, particularly if the engine is running hotter than usual. If the needle starts climbing fast or sitting in the red, I would advise you really to stop driving immediately. That damage just tends to escalate, and you look at much more expensive repairs if the engine actually does completely overheat. Look for obvious air leaks, particularly in a turbocharged engine. There's a lot of pressure on the intake side of the engine, and if the hose has split, if the connector has started to break away, that can often only manifest itself under load. In the main, the pressure inside the system is sufficient to not overcome that gap or that weakness, and as soon as we put our foot down, the pressure spikes and that little gap or weakness opens up and we lose some boost or some air, and that can lead to a flat spot or poor running. The last thing people often check probably should be here in the triage section, and that's the battery and the alternator system. If the voltage is too low, that can cause all sorts of problems. If the engine is running faster, we're doing more RPM, there is more demand for spark. All the electrical components that run an engine are working harder, and generally the voltage drain is greater. The battery just acts as a buffer. The alternator is what is producing the 12 to 14 volts of current that the engine actually needs. But if there's a weakness in that buffer, if the battery is degraded, you're going to start to notice any dips in power, particularly if the alternator is weak or not able to produce sufficient power. It's just worth checking the voltage. You can get little things that plug into the cigarette lighter that give you a voltage reading, and just make sure it is in the optimum range, ideally about 14 volts when the engine is running. And if we notice that dipping down when we start to accelerate, there was probably a fault somewhere in the electrical system. I hope you found the video useful. Please boot the like button. I've lined up this video and this playlist that will just help you to get the best long life out of your car, to keep on top of all the maintenance. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do so. That would really help us to get out there, and you won't miss out on the great video content we've got planned. Thanks for watching. See you in these next videos.